Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, WeatherTech, Hum by Verizon, RockAuto.com, State Farm, and Autotempest.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
And thank you, Alec Webb. Welcome, everyone, to MotorWeek podcast number 180. I am John Davis in our Studio C headquarters at MotorWeek Central. And around our table today is writer-producer Brian Robinson.
Happy to be here.
Our road test producer, Ben Davis.
Hey-o.
Our assistant road test producer, Greg Carlos.
Also happy to be here.
And our video producer, editor, who stepped out from behind all of his hardware, Joe Ligo.
Also, it's my fault. Greg's position is online content coordinator.
That's the second time you've done
I wrote
that.
the wrong thing on the podcast.
He did get a promotion.
This.
You know, he got,
and he got promoted like a year ago, so it's my fault for screwing that up. So sorry, Greg.
You'll make it up to him, I know.
He'll always be assistant road test producer in my heart.
Yeah.
If I had any brains up there, I would have caught that before I said it. But then again, moving on. Joe is the producer of our podcast, and he decided today that we would do a green car podcast. So we're going to be talking about 4 different electrified vehicles that we've recently tested. And we'll still have our lightning round and a viewer question. And we're going to start off.
No, don't turn it off. Don't turn it off.
We'll start off with what has to be the most talked about and anticipated electric vehicle and probably car, period, in the last several years, and that is the Tesla Model 3. And recently we had a chance to, thanks to a very nice owner who brought his by our studio, to spend a lot of time with the 3 and talk to him about it. And Ben, you've shot the bejeebies out of the vehicle
sure have.
and drove it more than I did.
Yes,
so
I have.
what did you think?
I was impressed with the car, and I like the suspension. It's more of a European feel than what I remember from the S. Very akin to a 3 Series in that matter.
The old 3 Series.
Yeah, the one that mattered. The driver's 3 Series. Ouch. And while this car does have some autonomous capability, it's not the reason I would buy the car, because it still is very much a driver's car. Steering is nicely weighted and super sharp off-center. So it is fun to throw it around and toss it around, and you got that squirt of power underfoot all the time. This was a 2-wheel drive model, and you can get it in all-wheel drive. I just had a blast driving it. I mean, what can I tell you?
I spent a lot less time in it than you did, and mostly in the passenger seat. And my impression was it was pretty quiet inside. There wasn't any wind noise, which is often a bugaboo of vehicles that are basically during their ramp up of production. It did have a little bit more rear suspension noise than I thought, and I think there's a lot been written. I'm not going to add too much to it. Some of the body seams are not as tight as you might think they should be, but the car seemed extraordinarily competent. There were it's very minimalist on the inside, and I think our friend who brought the car to us, one of the things he doesn't like about it is the big center screen, which virtually every control is on it, doesn't tilt at all. And when I was sitting in the passenger seat with a red jacket on, it was reflecting so bad he couldn't really see what he needed to see to operate the car. So that it has some deficiencies. But also, when you compare it, basically this is half the price of a Model S. It looks like if he can actually build them, being Mr. Musk, they will do just fine. It was certainly the quality of the fit and finish on the interior I thought was quite good. The ventilation system seemed to work quite better than I expected. It almost anticipated where you were sitting.
And it remained hidden, too, pretty much.
Totally hidden, except for the slit for the air to come out.
Exactly. I mean, seats were super comfortable, too. And
did the minimalist aspect, though, of not having any physical controls except for a couple of stalks in the steering wheel bother you?
Not at all. I got used to it real fast, and I thought it was beautiful.
I was in front of that car was a red car. I was in front of a white car yesterday, as a matter of fact, coming back from York, Pennsylvania. And I must say, I think it's color dependent. The white car looked smaller and not as expensive. I thought that red car we had was very nice looking.
Mm-hmm.
So.
The front of it reminds me of the old Corvairs.
Yes, yes.
How it's such a big vertical
or a little
panel.
or a little bit like the old Renault Caravels. Remember what they looked like with that kind of
past.
very. But I have a lot of history with the Caravels.
It's unique to itself, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It looks more expensive than it costs.
The question is, do you think it should have been a utility with it? Every other automaker who puts out an
Well, it's
EV,
going to be.
Well, I know they're going to do a utility version, but it seems like every other automaker, even the Chevy Bolt, is trying to pretend it's a utility. That seems to be like they're if they're going to build an EV, they want to play it safe and make it a utility rather than, I guess, the
Interesting
3
question.
is a 5-door.
It's a
hatch
good question, but
vehicle.
I think if they were designing it today, maybe they'd think about that. But this car's been in gestation a long time.
Well,
Brian?
I think their whole point was to create the next generation sports sedan that everyone else to be the new 3 Series.
be the new 3 Series.
And so I think that's why it's not an SUV.
I think that's probably
I'm sure
absolutely correct.
An SUV version will come soon enough.
And frankly, I think they might not have gotten the groundswell of opinion on this vehicle if it had been something else, more utility. They put the performance of the car first. I think Brian's got a very good point. Speaking of utilities, Jaguar has actually gone the route that you were talking about with their I-Pace. This is their Pace is their SUV lineup, basically. The I-Pace is all electric, and I had a chance to drive it about 2 weeks ago. Very limited, but I wanted to see whether the vehicle really handled like a Jaguar, and that was the primary thing they did allow us to do, was do some handling on a very tight, closed course. Of course, it's fast. I mean, this thing still persists that people think that electric cars are not fast, but they are. This one has almost 400 horsepower. It's not a comparable vehicle to the Tesla X, their big SUV. I do think, even though it's smaller, it could be comparable to the Tesla S. So it's larger than the Tesla Model 3, but it's smaller than the S. It's very sleek looking. I would say downright sexy. It has a range that's reasonable. It's about 230 miles, so it's not as long as you can get in some of the Tesla models. But it was a pretty special vehicle. And the interior is very Jaguar, both in the quality of the materials and the control layout. So rather than have a minimalist approach, it's fairly complicated on the inside. Almost everybody that drove it, I think, was very impressed based on the limited experience we had with it. Jaguar made a big deal about the fact that they have beat the Germans to the market with an all-electric vehicle in this class. And I wish them well. I thought it was pretty exciting.
Is it an all-new chassis that's going to have other vehicles on it? Or
It is an all-new chassis. They described it basically, as a skateboard type chassis, so they can do just about anything they want on it. They weren't going to tell us about anything else that was coming, but clearly you could do other vehicles on this.
An electric Land Rover. No, I don't know about that.
Well, I don't think that. I mean, we've already heard lots of rumblings out of Land Rover.
Just a matter of time.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time. They certainly, it wouldn't be a huge vehicle, but it certainly would be totally different because that's what they've been doing. Even though they've been sharing chassis, they don't look anything like each other.
They know how to get their money's worth out of a chassis there.
Yeah.
So they spread their costs well, it seems.
Moving on to something that's 75,000 give or take to start, so it certainly isn't cheap. It's 69.5 is the MSRP, but I think you're not going to see one for less than 75 or 80. Vehicle rolling into, and I should go back and point out that Tesla Model 3 we had, which is a $35,000 vehicle to start. The one we tested was $50,000, right?
Because it was a long-range battery.
Yeah, they're not even going to build the base model for another year or something.
Yeah.
So these are not really challengers to something like the Nissan Leaf or the Chevrolet Bolt EV, at least as far as price.
Not this one, anyway.
Okay, something that's very practical that's out now, and I think we generally quite like it, is the Kia Niro PHEV. We certainly like the Niro without the PHEV aspect. Who wants to start there? 1.6-liter engine, electric motor, 139 horsepower. What's the all-electric range?
It's under 15, I think, right?
Yeah. Is it under 15?
I thought it was 26.
That's what I
26.
remember.
26.
That's
Is
what
it that
I thought
much?
it was.
I think that's right. It's not as it has more range than a lot of the European stuff that we've been seeing in the PHEV area, but it's not a Chevy Volt. With the
I didn't get much time with it. The Niro is growing on me. I kind of hated on it when it first came out, mainly because they call it a SUV when it doesn't even have all-wheel drive.
Just because it's a square hatchback.
Yeah, that's beside the point. It's kind of, our long term is kind of growing on me. It's a pretty comfortable car. Rides really nice. This just gives you the added electric bonus. So
reminds me of a newer like Ford C-Max. Like it's just a tall hatchback.
It's a much more tolerable C-Max in terms of styling. That's for sure.
Yeah, the C-Max is very Euro looking.
It's enough range to get me to work. Not that I would be able to plug it in once I got here.
You
but
can't hear.
Well, I'd be fighting until somebody else got one. There's only one here, but it's worth the little bit of extra money for me just to be able to plug it into a spot closer to a store that has plug-in power.
Mm-hmm. Like preferred parking for EV customers.
Yeah, I mean that's worth it right there. There's a couple spots in Ocean City that are never taken up, and they're prime spots. It wouldn't be fair to plug into it for somebody that might have a pure EV. I would feel like I was robbing them of a spot, but for me, it's worth it.
If it was available.
you wouldn't feel bad for long.
Yeah.
No, I'm just trying to set up the image that I would feel bad, but I wouldn't.
I personally think these PHEVs, and for that matter, the all-electric vehicles, even with limited range like the older Leafs, they make a lot of sense if you need a second vehicle and the person going to be driving it doesn't drive very much. They just run into the store once in a while or town. You never have to stop and gas it up. I think they're really terrific. I just hope the prices keep coming down.
Way down.
For me, it's kind of a tale of two cars because I have quite a hefty highway commute in, so I like the Niro, even the standard Niro and the PHEV. It's actually a really nice city car around town. Switching back and forth between battery and
the hybrid,
and yeah, it's really pretty seamless. But
we're
I got to
getting
say,
40 some miles to the gallon on that, almost 50.
Yeah, but I just don't like driving it on the highway. It's loud. It's hard to keep your speed up, and I don't know. I think that's a car that belongs more in just running around town and quick jaunt things. So I think it's something to consider if you do have I know the fuel economy is enticing, but if you do have a long commute on a highway, maybe you should test drive it out there and just make sure you can live with that on a daily basis, because I'm not sure I could.
You're tall. Do you feel pinched when you get in it?
No, I think I've never noticed a problem, I should say that.
How tall are you?
6'3".
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's actually pretty significant, I think.
I would tell you that I've had plenty of problems getting into our previous X1. I just remembered having trouble fitting in that car. Until you got in the seat and put it all the way down, that seat would go very low. But I've never had a problem with the Niro.
The other PHEV we've had in recently is the 2018 Mini Cooper SE Countryman all four. I'm a Mini Cooper fan. I've not been crazy about the past Countrymans. I like this one better. But here is a case, for $37,650 to start, about whether or not it's really worth the extra money for the all EV range. Which, Brian, isn't it pretty low?
Maybe that's the one I was thinking was under 15.
I think it's
I'm
around
pretty sure
15,
12 or 13 on that one. Yeah.
and it's like it's a lot of extra money. I've forgotten.
Oh, it's $10,000 more than the Niro plug-in. Granted, they're not competitive.
I think
in the
it's
same
like
market,
even $8,000 more than the Countryman without the electric. But I guess what Mini's doing here is there's a lot of rumblings that Mini wants to be, quote unquote, BMW's electric brand. That's different, of course, from their I brand. And they are looking at making all of their vehicles in the next generation electrified in one way or another. And of course, they're not new to the electric game, but this vehicle seems a lot more practical than the last one.
It's a little more complex than a regular plug-in hybrid, only because the all-wheel drive system is all electric.
All electric.
Yeah, that's the engines. It's not like a hybrid where it's just an electric motor mated on the engine. This one had electric motors on the rear wheels that power the rear wheels. So,
and it didn't have there was no electrification of the front wheels, right?
Correct. It's strictly the 1.5 liter turbo powering the front wheels, strictly the E motor powering the rear wheels. And because of that, it handled, I felt anyway, a little clunky. Not at all like you would expect a Mini to handle. It kind of really didn't give me that. The only reason I would buy a Mini is because they are fun to drive, and that one didn't seem anywhere
weight
near.
was thrown off a
yeah,
little.
and just the weight and just with the different power sources kicking in. It was quick though. That does give it a definite boost in straight line speed if you get your battery charged. So other than that,
I think it's very significant though that it uses electric only for the rear. Toyota's done that.
RAV4. I think it's the
new
RAV.
Highlander.
No, Highlander.
Yeah,
started
yeah,
it
old
with them.
RAV4s did too. Yeah.
And the RAV4 as well.
It had
Lexus
the
has done it as well.
all-wheel drive on the RAV4.
But when you're thinking about future SUVs, and our question from the viewer question basically pertains towards this. When you're thinking about space utilization, right now virtually every crossover has a lot of space. It has to be taken up by a drive line that's running from the engine to the rear wheels. This solves that problem by having electric motors. Yes, you've got to have a battery somewhere, and yes, it's more complex. But from space utilization, it makes total sense. And I, for one, can't figure out why we haven't seen more of them. It must be cost.
Well, cost, packaging, like you said, it had a much smaller fuel tank because some of those batteries ate into where they would normally store the fuel tank. So even with the electric hybrid power, you had less range than you would in a normal gas Countryman.
Let's get on into our viewer question, and this comes from Wes from Denver, and it plays right into this. As you mentioned on a previous podcast, the minivan segment has had some great success recently and has great features. His question is, why don't manufacturers start incorporating all of the creature comforts of minivans into crossovers, trucks, and cars? He then points out to things like Chrysler's stow-and-go seating, which, by the way, is unique to FCA's minivans. I personally think a lot of it is that space they've got to use up for the drivetrain and so forth. Anybody have another comment on that?
Yeah, it would have to be front-wheel drive, which most crossovers are. I don't see why they couldn't have a front-wheel drive only one have folding to the floors. But really, it's just the construction of the interiors are totally different. You got the minivan sit so low, you know.
I think you would have
And that's
trouble.
a very good point. Minivans sit much lower than your average crossover.
Yeah, I think honestly the mechanics of getting up and stowing into the seat or to the floor would be a little bit harder in an SUV.
Yeah.
And then, well, there's also his email as the producer. I trimmed his email a little because it was a little bit long, but he was also getting
You messed with his words, Joe. I'm so disappointed.
I didn't add any words. I just trimmed it. But
So
he
Wes,
was also,
don't get upset out
He
there.
was also alluding to stuff like the Honda intercom system and the stow and vac, and like just when he said features, he meant stow and go, but then also. A
lot of that stuff's just marketing to get people to actually look at minivans.
But I mean,
Yeah,
could
people are
you
going to
put
buy SUVs anyway.
Yeah.
I mean,
But do you think that it would be worth the trouble to put in these other little, gimmicky entertainment?
Why don't you go to Home Depot and buy a battery-powered vac and stick it in the back?
Yeah, I think the Highlander you can get the intercom, but I think part of it is a lot of people, when you buy minivans, I think people use that third row a lot more. Most people with three-row, especially crossovers, the third row is kind of an emergency use kind of thing. Occasional use. It's not like minivans where people buy them just to pack them full of people.
True.
There is no more useful vehicle than a minivan. I just
got
hope
that
don't go
right,
away.
man.
Okay, thanks, Wes, and
all
thanks,
of us.
everybody. We do have
of
a
us own a
lightning
minivan.
round question. We all get about 30 seconds each of us to share an opinion. We're not doing the old style where we all talk over each other. So here's the question. The Tesla Model 3 does not come with a key, a traditional key. Instead, all of the key functions and a lot more are controlled by the Tesla smartphone app. What do we all think about phones replacing the car key?
Ooh. I must go first on this because I had lunch with the owner, and coming back out into the car, he had an issue either with his phone glitching out or the app glitching out, and we sat for 10 minutes.
Suppose your phone dies.
There's a lot of issues that can go. If my phone's not crashing, guaranteed an app's crashing. And to have that the sole reliability, and he did have some cards that came with the car that were supposed to start it in lieu of a key, but they weren't working. And then to get everything reestablished, he had to put in his Tesla customer number, which he wasn't sure of off the hand. So it was like a leap of faith. And we got it 10 minutes later. But if a tornado was coming down the alley and we had to get out of there, we would have been dead. So,
I agree with you. I mean, I think now I'm the oldest one sitting at this table, and to me, it's like I accept key fobs. Okay, I think they're fine, and I accept even keypads on this, like Ford's used for a long time on a lot of their products. I think there's a lot of other options, but to just not have any physical key whatsoever just assumes that everybody's going to be walking around with a fully operating
fully
charged phone.
Oh, not to jump back in, but it had no on-off button either, so you just walk away from it, and it eventually locks itself and turns itself off. I don't think I could ever get used to that.
Anybody else? You're younger than I am by a long stretch.
Yeah, just a few years.
So, and you live on your phone a lot.
Yeah.
So you're probably the best qualified, Dan, to talk about this.
I like the idea of having the ability to use to unlock and start my car on my phone. But I side with Ben that I think you can't get rid of a physical key. There are just way too many things that can go wrong. As good as technology is, as good as phones are, as good as apps are going to get, there's still going to be a situation where you need a physical key. So I don't see that ever going away. I mean, you said something about cars. I don't really know what that is. So it's like a
credit
card. Or
Yeah,
that's what I meant.
credit card size. Yeah.
You just hold it
Like
up
a
to
proximity
something.
thing. If you have it in your wallet, apparently it'll act as a
And
regular key
at that
fob.
rate, why not just give me a key? You know?
Does anybody
I could live with the
disagree
card.
with this, Joe or Brian? Over there?
For me, it's a security thing. I mean, I love the feature. I'm like Greg. I love the fact that you can do stuff with your phone to turn your heat on, turn the air conditioning on, do all that. I just relying only on your phone with no sort of manual override makes me nervous.
Yeah, you'd have to have a backup.
Okay.
So
Enough said. No more piling on. Anyone have a rant or rave about anything today? Is it my imagination, or in our area around Baltimore, are driving skills deteriorating rapidly and even further?
It's funny you mentioned that because I've noticed one accident at least a day for the last at least week.
So
I noticed one this morning on the way in on Black Rock. Every day I see a crash.
So I agree with you, but I want to go further. What's the answer? Because it seems like it's just worse news every day about people's driving ability. So what's the solution?
We've
to this?
had 2 or 3 fatal 2-car accidents in our area this week, and it's not. And we're only on middle of the week.
I think to take it even a step further than Joe. I mean, you have to educate more. How you do that, I don't know. I'm not the one to answer
I feel like
it.
driver's tests are the same now as they were 30 years ago.
I wonder if specifically in our area it has to do with, because you always notice a rise in accidents around daylight savings time. So I'm thinking we've had some not so great weather, especially this far into spring. I think, honestly, people are just mad. They are less patient. You see it all the time. I'm not judging anybody. I certainly feel the same way. But I think that
frustration.
I think you could definitely attribute some of that rise in accidents to that.
Maybe.
And another thing that I've seen quite a few times, to add on to the rant, is when somebody's turning right on a yellow-lined road and the person behind you no longer feels the need to wait, so they will cross the double yellow into the other lane and pass you. Like, it's just normal. Like, that's... Yeah. I don't remember ever learning where that's okay to do. And sometimes it's not even when there's nobody coming.
The 4 lanes in front of our building. How many times have you guys ever gotten past in the turn lane?
Oh, sure.
That's scary.
Oh, that is Thunder left. I have.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, pass
people
on the
pass
left.
You in the turn. People will go into the turning lane.
But I have a lot
of
of people pass you in the shoulder. If you're out on the interstate and it's rough traffic, and they're going to get off, half mile down the road, and there's no lane yet to get off, no exit. They'll hop over onto the shoulder and go.
Scary stuff.
Yeah. It's like, I don't think highway rules seem to mean much for anybody anymore. Well, this morning, somebody with a DC license plate came shooting out of a side street in front of me and about 5 other cars, basically bumper to bumper. Didn't stop at a stop sign, didn't pause, didn't do anything, just win. So I don't know.
A friend of mine just had a brand new Q7 backed into in a parking lot yesterday.
Did they leave his number? Their number?
Yeah, everybody was in the car when
there.
it happened. Yeah, so
And that's with probably a backup camera.
saved up all their money to finally buy the Q7, only to have it
That's a
hit
shame,
within
man.
the same week.
Parking lots are scary.
Was the car that backed into them new enough to have a backup camera?
That's a good question. I'm
I
not
know.
sure.
I feel like our next podcast, we should have an answer to how we can fix bad driving, so we can.
Yeah, just natural selection.
Leave me alone.
Autonomous cars, right?
Autonomous cars. Oh, no.
Not again.
All right. Thanks
Shut
very
up.
much, everybody around the table. Brian Robinson, Ben Davis, Greg Carlos, and Joe Ligo. I'd also like to thank our audio engineer, Jim Bigwood, for making us all sound bright and cheery, and our podcast creator, Bob Mixter. We hope, of course, that you not only enjoy our podcast, but also MotorWeek, the television series that you can catch on public TV stations around the country, and also the Velocity channel. If you're not sure where to find us or how to set your DVR, go to our website, motorweek.org, pull down the scheduling button at the top, and put in your zip code, and away you go.
How about a magazine? I read that all the
Yeah,
time.
well, we don't quite have a magazine yet, only in our
Should be
minds.
on Motor Trend Network.
Thank you very much. Everyone stay well, and thanks for being a part of MotorWeek.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, WeatherTech, Hum by Verizon, RockAuto.com, State Farm, and Autotempest.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.